Hi, this is Ian Moya. There are 3 people here and 3 people on the phone. According to a survey conducted by the Erickson Institute, 85% of parents said that they allowed their young children to use some sort of electronic device every day, whether that being tablets, phones, or TV. Limits on screen time are important because excess screen time is harmful to younger children. First, I'll give you some background statistics about screen time. Then, I will list the negatives of screens. And finally, I will give examples on what you can do to combat these problems. So first, let's look at some background statistics about screens and screen time. According to Kaiser Family Foundation, external, kids ages 8 to 18 spend on average a whopping 7.5 hours in front of screens for entertainment each day, 4.5 of which are spent watching TV. Take that average and calculate it for a whole year, and that's 2,737 hours, which is equivalent to 114 days. Another article from Stephen John said, however, there's been a dramatic upstick in hours spent staring at media. According to the BBC News, in the mid-1990s, children in the UK between the ages of 5 and 16 had an average of 3 hours of screen time each day. In 2015, kids consumed 6.5 hours of screen time per day, on average. This not only affirms that there is an average of 7 hours spent on screens, but then the number has jumped drastically since the 1990s. Now let's hear some negatives of technology. As of recently, there have been many studies about the correlation between technology and how it affects the mind. The biggest of these studies have been the correlations between mental health and social media. As stated in an article titled, How Does Social Media Affect Teenagers by the University of Queensland, as the adolescent brain is developing, it's more vulnerable to time online. And since teens can sometimes struggle to self-regulate their screen time, their exposure, and the risk of harm increases. As a result, teen social media use often correlates with depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, envy, and loneliness. Social media allows one to stay up to date with their friends and what their friends are doing and provides an easy way to keep in contact with them. But the negatives that come with social media also need to be brought into consideration. Social media can take a toll on mental health because of the constant need for likes and attention. So providing a limit would not only boost morale, but it would draw back from the need of attention. The other main study about the effects of technology is how it hinders or inhibits the mind during growth and development. As stated in an article written by Cross, early data from the Landmark National Institute of Health that began in 2018 indicates that children who spent more than 2 hours a day on screen time activities scored lower on language and thinking tests, and some children with more than 7 hours a day of screen time experienced thinning of the brain cortex in the area of brain related to critical thinking and reasoning. Then there is another article that provides good results gathered from an experiment titled Screen Time Slows Child Development by Nature. It states that Sherry Magdalene at the University of Calgary in Canada and her colleagues analyzed the development and screen habits of nearly 2,500 children in Canada. That team found that compared with those exposed to relatively low levels of screen time, children who spent more time in front of a screen at the age of 2 scored worse on developmental tests at the age of 3, and children who racked up more screen time at the age of 3 scored worse at the age of 5. This suggests that extensive screen time precedes lower scores on developmental tests. Both these show how detrimental screens can be to adolescents because their brains are still developing, which means that their brains are more subject to change and compared to those of adults. Now finally, let's get some examples of how you can help. One of the biggest things you can do to help is set parameters and monitor the amount of screen time per day, whether that be putting limits on apps, so that they can get a grasp of how long is too long to spend on screens. Another way parents can do is designate time to spend away from screens, whether that be doing something outside like going on a bike ride, or just playing a board game with the family. They need to have social interactions away from screens so that their interactions are not just revolved around screens. Then finally, the last example is to make them earn it. Don't just let them wake up every day and just look at screens. They need to get up, get breakfast, do something, maybe do some chores to earn their screen time so they're not just sitting right in front of a screen right when they wake up. So to conclude, I first stated stats about screens and screen time, then I listed the negatives of screens, and finally I gave examples of how you can combat the problem of screens. Being a child is the only time where there's no care in the world and having fun is the main priority. So spending too much time staring at a screen is no healthy way to live. Parents need to make a conscious effort to be aware of the amount of times that kids are on their screens. Otherwise, that 85% could eventually keep climbing and become a bigger problem than it already is. Thank you.